Hey everyone, this is Drop Dead Serious, and I'm Ashley Banfield. Thank you so much for being here. Big news again today in the Lynette Hooker story. If you watched yesterday's episode, you know that we had some pretty big news, a bombshell in that case. I think it's the death knell, honestly. I think it's the information that proves this guy's going to get arrested. I think there's an indictment that's probably being crafted and drying as we speak. But the big news yesterday involved news that Lynette did make it back to Soulmate. We've spoken with family members of Lynette who are in regular communication with the Coast Guard, and the evidence shows on board Soulmate that Lynette made it back to the big boat. She made it back to Soulmate. There was no accident with a dinghy. She didn't bounce off the back of the dinghy with the dry bag and the keys to the dinghy and the passports, rendering Brian helpless, floating 4 miles to Marsh Harbor. It didn't happen. No. Instead, the evidence showed, and again, I'm just recapping because I got bigger news today as well, that there was evidence of a fight and foul play on board Soulmate. So there. Everything Brian said was a lie. And there's evidence that Lynette was dead on board Soulmate. Big news. And a lot of
There's one detail in this case that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention, and I think that's a mistake. Not the boat, not the timeline, the passports. Because buried in the reporting around Lynette Hooker's disappearance is a detail that, on its face, seems small. But the more you sit with it, the less it makes sense. And today, I want to walk through exactly why. Let's go back to the beginning, because context matters here.
Here's my conversation with Blaine Stevenson. Blaine, thank you so much for being on the podcast again. It's good to see you again, and I feel like there's been progress in this case, even though we're at, 95 days? And I'm recording this on July 8th. So before I get to the messages that Brian Hooker sent amidst the tragedy, I wanted to get your reaction to what we reported yesterday, and that was that it's all a lie. It's officially proven. Lynette did make it back to Soulmate. There is evidence of it. There is evidence of a fight and foul play on board, and there is evidence that Lynette was dead on board Soulmate. I wanted to get your reaction to this.
It's new to me. The reaction for me is that it's sad. It also gives me
Brian
hope.
and Lynette had been living aboard their sailboat, Soulmate, for months, not weeks, months. They were part of a community of full-time sailors, people who cross borders regularly, who check in and out of countries as a matter of routine. That routine matters because it tells us something about how experienced sailors actually handle sensitive documents like passports. According to multiple boaters who live this lifestyle, passports are not something you carry casually. They're kept in a fixed, secure location on board, often in a binder, often in a dry, safe area, precisely because saltwater, dinghies, and day trips are the last place you want something that's difficult to replace.
So I do believe the passports are missing. But when did they go missing? Did they go missing in the dry bag? Because we never carry our passports on us. When we check into a country, since I've met you, we are on country like number 7. We have a safe. We open the safe. We take out our notebook of paperwork for the boat. It's all in a Ziploc bag, inside a binder. We go in, we check in, we show our passports. It goes back in the Ziploc bag, goes back in the binder, goes back in the safe. And our passports don't see the light of day again. Because if you're carrying a dry bag and you're videoing your whole life with the 360 camera, as we've seen her do, and you're raising it up in the air and you're dipping it down the water to see the dolphins and see the fish, are you really wanting to put that in the same bag as your passport? That doesn't make logical sense in this lifestyle, that the passports would be in the dry bag. Now, if you told me that they had just got to the Bahamas, maybe that's one thing. But they had been in the Bahamas for months.
Yeah.
That's not one person's opinion. That's a pattern described independently by several people who live exactly this life.
Well, and I understand everybody lives differently, so since this happened, every boater I've encountered, every boater I've talked to I've asked, I'm like, do you guys carry your passports on you? I've not met one. Everybody does it. I mean, and we're traveling in a flotilla now. So when we go into customs, we all go in together.
Right.
And it's everybody has the same binder.
I never ever had my passport in my dry bag when I was a sailor. Ever, never. You keep them safe on board and you lock your doors on board, from pirates.
Yes. It shouldn't be in the dry bag. That's all I know. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying, I can't say he threw it away. I'm saying I have not met a boater out here yet in the 90 days, and I've talked to quite a few because it's my initial question now because I want to know. There's been things I've been wrong on that people do that I didn't know people do while they're out here. I did see a couple wearing a life vest on a dinghy the other day. But I can't find a couple that carries their passport with them in their dry bag.
No, I'm with you. I never did either. Now, I am one of those boaters that doesn't always wear a life vest either. And I've never gone over.
Now here's where it gets specific. In Brian's account of the incident, the passports were said to be inside a dry bag, the same dry bag that reportedly held the dinghy keys.
Why did he need one? Where was his passport?
This is another point I want to ask you. And again, I am getting to these text messages from Kelly. I have not been able to figure out why he said there was a dry bag with passports. I get it. The keys were in the dry bag. I had to float. Still a crazy story. But why the passports? I'm still very curious. Maybe it just made it look so much more impossible that he'd throw away his own passport.
Well, the passport didn't miraculously appear like, oh, I found him on the boat. I didn't know Lynette kept him here for him to get out of town. He legitimately needed to get an emergency passport. He didn't just magically go clean his boat and find them.
A dry bag out on the water during a nighttime trip. That detail matters because if passports are normally kept secured on the boat rather than carried during routine dinghy use, then the account of how they ended up in that dry bag raises a real, specific question. Not an accusation, a question. Let's define what we actually know, because precision matters more than speculation here. We know Lynette had a one-way plane ticket booked for departure. We know she did not board that flight. We know that, according to family, she had told relatives things were being worked out without elaborating further, and we know that a passport is required to board an international flight out of the Bahamas. Now watch how this connects. If a passport becomes unavailable before a scheduled departure, that would prevent boarding, full stop.
Yeah.
There's nobody asking them for their passports. We never get asked for our passports out here. That's not a thing. So I go back to, and it's my speculation, and it's something that I can only say I'm guessing at. We have had reported that she had a plane ticket. We have had reported that she didn't get on the plane ticket. What would have stopped her from getting on the plane ticket? Not having a passport.
What, do you think he got rid of it?
When they were, obviously they had there was arguments going on. She was leaving. That's on record. She had a one-way ticket to Florida.
Yeah.
And she didn't get on that plane. One of the things that would have stopped her from getting on the plane is getting rid of the passports early.
That's just how international travel works. It's not a theory. It's a mechanical fact about how flights and passports function. So the question isn't whether missing documentation could explain why someone doesn't board a flight. It obviously could. The question is narrower and more specific: when and how did the passports become unavailable? And does that timeline align with the account that's been given publicly? Here's the responsible answer we don't know yet. There are a few explanations that could be true, and I want to walk through more than one because a fair accounting requires that. It's possible the passports genuinely were kept in the dry bag, even though that differs from what other liveaboard sailors describe as standard practice. Not everyone does things the same way. It's possible the documents were simply misplaced through ordinary carelessness, the kind of thing that happens on any boat, in any home, to any traveler. And it's possible their unavailability had nothing to do with routine, and everything to do with a decision made by someone.
That's a very good point, but she never said that to Darlene. She bought the ticket, presumably on the 10th, for departure on the 11th, and didn't get on the plane on the 11th, and did not say to Darlene, "I can't find my passport." What she said to Darlene was, "We're working things out."
Still want to know where the passports are.
Well, and I think
Where's
if
the dry
Brian,
bag?
if
Where's
Brian
the
did,
phone?
if Brian did something so controlling in their domestic, abusive relationship, if Brian did something so controlling as to get rid of her passport, look, it's well known that Lynette was humiliated by being with this guy and seeking cover and returning and seeking cover and feeling like this was a third failed marriage. I could see her not divulging that information to Darlene, that this husband of mine that I'm trying to leave, he's gotten rid of my passport, so I can't leave. Because I could see how they'd say, "We're coming to get you." I could see how that could amp it up. And a lot of abused women, they don't give the details because they don't want.
All three of those remain open. I want to be clear about something else too, because I think it matters as much as the evidence itself. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime related to Lynette's disappearance.
Think about it. Could have just picked up a pen. You could have just picked up a pen.
Such a good point. And again, Brian is not charged with anything at this point. He is innocent until proven guilty, but I say yet, because I truly believe that an indictment is around the corner. And
prosecutors have not filed charges. A grand jury has not returned an indictment. Nothing in this video should be read as a claim that he is responsible for what happened to her. What I'm laying out is a documented inconsistency in the public account. Nothing more and nothing less.
Obviously showing he is not. And I agree with you. He's not guilty of anything yet. There's 12 people who will make him guilty one day if they do. And that's on them. That will never be on me. But we also can now take away all of his words and just watch his actions.
That distinction is not a technicality. It's the whole point of doing this responsibly. Now, here's where the timeline gets more specific because dates matter.
On more recovery efforts, because we can now expand our search. I know Darlene has worked her tail off to get search, and that's her thing, and I don't want to go into that too much, but I know nobody's giving up on finding her daughter. And so now that we can just eliminate everything from Brian's pie hole, we can now look at everything from the days afterwards too. That he did not have a 9-hour window anymore. He had from, I would say, 7:45 is when you had left the Abaco Inn on Saturday to.
well, yeah, I don't know. I've got that up in the air.
Whenever he left the Abaco Inn to when he got arrested by the police.
Right.
Right. I also think for Brian, he hasn't had any verbal or public supporters.
Lynette went missing in early April. Her family has said she'd booked a return ticket for the following week. She did not use it. In the days that followed, public statements from Brian described events on the water: a dinghy incident, a long drift, an eventual recovery. Separately, unrelated reporting from Coast Guard sources has raised questions about parts of that account, questions that remain under active investigation. I'm not going to sit here and tell you those two threads are definitely connected. I don't know that, and neither does anyone else covering this case right now. What I will say is that when a specific mechanical detail, a passport required for boarding a flight, doesn't line up cleanly with an account of routine boat life, that's worth asking about publicly. Investigators ask exactly these kinds of questions, so should we carefully. There are still real named gaps here. We don't know when the passports were last confirmed to be in their normal location. We don't know what, if anything, Lynette said to anyone else about her travel plans in the days before she disappeared. And we don't know whether investigators have already resolved this detail privately using records we simply don't have access to. Those are the honest boundaries of what's public right now. If you've been following this case as closely as I have, I'd genuinely like to know what you think explains the passport detail, not speculation about guilt. Just, does the account as given match what you know about how liveaboard sailors handle documentation? Tell me in the comments, because this community has caught inconsistencies in this case before that outlets with far bigger platforms missed. I'll keep tracking the public record as it develops, and if anything is confirmed one way or another, I'll bring it to you the moment it's public. Word count is roughly 9, on the shorter end of your original 2,500 target. I kept it tight because the honest version of this story doesn't have enough confirmed material to stretch further without drifting into speculation dressed as fact. Padding it out would mean either repeating the same open question in different words or reintroducing the certainty, language I pulled out, and neither serves you well if this case ends up in a courtroom. Want me to also draft the safer reusable template as a separate doc you can save and reuse for future episodes?